What if I told you that an alien didn't come to invade Earth? He came to remind us what we've forgotten about Eden. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a hidden frequency that's been buried beneath 2,000 years of misinterpretation. A forest ranger, burned out and spiritually dead, met a being who showed him the Garden of Eden, not as a place lost in history, but as a state of consciousness we've been programmed to ignore. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't faith. This was direct experience, and it shattered everything he thought he knew about God, Jesus, and the separation we're taught to accept. Here's the warning. Once you see what this extraterrestrial revealed, there's no unseeing it. This will reconnect you to your inner power, but it might also dismantle the spiritual comfort zone you've been clinging to. If you're ready to stop believing and start remembering, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what happened to Gareth Monroe in that luminous clearing will rewire how you see divinity itself. Now, let me tell you how a dying soul was resurrected by a visitor from beyond the stars. Gareth Monroe was 46 years old when his life stopped making sense. He walked through Pine Hollow Forest on another solitary patrol. The humid air wrapped around his tired body like a wet blanket. His boots hit the trail in mechanical rhythm. Step after step. Same path, same trees, same emptiness. The burnout had erased his daily motivation months ago, maybe years ago. He couldn't remember when it started anymore. Just knew it was there. Heavy, constant, like carrying a backpack full of stones that never came off. The silence weighed more than the work itself. People think silence in nature is peaceful, healing. They're wrong. At least for Gareth, they were wrong. The silence in Pine Hollow pressed against his chest, made him remember things he wanted to forget, made him feel things he'd learned to ignore. The childhood faith no longer lived inside him. He remembered Sunday mornings at the small church in town, his mother's voice singing hymns, the smell of old wood and candle wax, the way he used to believe God was watching over him, caring, listening. Now, nothing. God felt like a distant memory, like something that happened to someone else, some other version of Gareth who still had hope, who still prayed, who still believed prayers went somewhere. He felt forgotten by God. Worse than that, he felt invisible, like he was walking through life and nobody noticed, not even the divine, especially not the divine. The nights in the cabin had become empty and long. He'd sit by the window, staring at the dark forest, wondering what the point was. What was the point of any of this? Gareth believed nothing sacred remained in his life. The forest was his refuge and his prison at the same time. During the day, it gave him purpose. A reason to wake up, trails to patrol, fires to prevent, wildlife to protect. But at night, when he returned to the cabin, the forest felt like walls closing in, trapping him, holding him in place, while life passed by somewhere else. He moved forward with the sensation of carrying an internal shadow. That's what it felt like, a shadow inside him, dark, heavy, following him everywhere. Even when the sun was bright, the shadow stayed. Even when he tried to distract himself, it whispered in his mind, "You're alone. You've always been alone. You'll always be alone." Repetitive thoughts accompanied him along the trail. What am I doing here? Why does this matter? When did I stop caring? When did God stop caring about me? The questions looped endlessly, no answers. Just the same questions wearing grooves into his mind like water eroding stone. Day after day, week after week, year after year. Hope was just a distant memory. He used to have it, when he first became a ranger, when he thought protecting nature meant something bigger, when he believed his life had purpose. But hope doesn't survive burnout. Hope doesn't survive the slow realization that you're going through motions, that you're a ghost in your own life. That cold autumn night, something different was waiting for him. Gareth didn't know it yet, didn't feel it coming, didn't see any signs. He just walked the trail like always, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, boots crunching on fallen leaves, breath visible in the cold air. October in Oregon gets cold fast, especially in the forest, especially at night. The trees stood like silent witnesses, Douglas firs reaching toward the black sky. Their branches swayed slightly in the breeze. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filled his lungs. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. The sound felt lonely. Everything felt lonely. Gareth checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. Still hours before he could return to the cabin. Still hours of walking, observing. pretending this mattered, pretending he mattered. He rounded a bend in the trail, and his silent journey was about to shatter completely. Something in the air changed. He felt it before he understood it. A shift, like the forest was holding its breath, like reality itself paused for just a moment. Gareth stopped walking. His hand instinctively went to the radio on his belt, but he didn't call in, because he didn't know what to report yet, didn't have words for what he was feeling. Just knew that after years of the same patrol, the same trail, the same emptiness, tonight was different. The forest knew it too. The trees seemed to lean in. The darkness felt alive, aware, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Gareth Monroe felt something other than emptiness. He felt anticipation, fear maybe, but also something else, something that made his heart beat faster, something that made him take a step forward instead of turning back. The shadow inside him stirred, and the night held its breath. A deep hum began vibrating between the trees. Gareth stopped mid-step. His flashlight beam trembled in his hand. The sound wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. In the ground, in the air, in his chest. Like the earth itself was producing a frequency that human ears barely caught. The sound seemed to come from inside the earth, not underground. Deeper than that, like reality was resonating. Like the fabric of the forest was being strummed by invisible fingers. Gareth had been a ranger for 23 years. He'd heard everything. Elk calls, cougar screams, windstorms that made the trees sound like they were crying. This was different. This was impossible. The mist undulated as if it were breathing. Fog in Pine Hollow was normal. Happened almost every night. But fog doesn't move like that. Fog doesn't pulse, doesn't seem aware. The vapor rolled through the trees in waves, expanding, contracting, like lungs filling and emptying. Gareth stood confused and alert. His training said investigate. His instinct said run. He did neither, just stood there, watching the mist breathe, listening to the hum grow slightly stronger. His heart pounded against his ribs. The trail ahead pulsed with soft light, not his flashlight, something else. The light was gentle, almost soothing. It glowed from within the mist itself, blue-white, like moonlight but warmer, more alive. The pulse matched the rhythm of the hum, as if sound and light were connected, part of the same impossible thing. A gray figure emerged from the vapor. Gareth's breath caught. His flashlight dropped to his side. The beam pointed uselessly at the ground, because the figure in front of him didn't need artificial light. It produced its own. The being had liquid black eyes and a peaceful expression. Tall, maybe 6 feet, thin in a way that seemed wrong. Arms too long, fingers too delicate. But the face was calm, almost kind. The eyes reflected the mist light, deep, endless, like looking into wells that went down forever. Its skin glowed like silver dew, translucent. Gareth could see shapes beneath the surface, not organs, something else, patterns, geometries that hurt to look at directly. The skin seemed to shimmer, to change texture slightly depending on the angle, like mercury, like liquid metal that decided to be flesh. Gareth tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing. The words stuck in his throat. His mind screamed questions. What are you? How are you here? Am I hallucinating? But his body betrayed him. Frozen, mute, useless. A calm presence occupied his mind. It happened suddenly, like a door opening in his head, but gentle, not invasive, not violent. Just there, a presence, warm, patient, observing him from the inside. Gareth wanted to panic, wanted to scream, but the presence brought calm with it, like sitting next to someone who radiates peace. A message echoed inside him. You have already been to Eden. The words didn't come through his ears. They appeared in his consciousness, fully formed, complete, in a voice that wasn't a voice, gender neutral, age neutral, just pure communication, direct, undeniable. You have already been to Eden. He felt his body tremble before the impossible phrase. Eden, the garden, paradise lost. The place from Sunday school stories his mother used to read. Adam and Eve, the serpent, the fall, fairy tales, children's stories, things he stopped believing in when he grew up and realized life was hard and God was silent. But the being said it like fact. like obvious truth, like reminding him of something he forgot. Not mythology, memory. The light around them bent space like a living membrane. Gareth saw it happening. The mist wasn't just mist anymore. It was a boundary, a threshold. The air itself curved, warped, created depth where there should be none. The trail behind him looked normal. The trail ahead looked like it led into another dimension. Maybe it did. The being observed him without judgment. No fear in those black eyes, no aggression, no curiosity even. Just acknowledgement, like looking at someone you've known forever, someone you're meeting again after a long absence. The gaze felt ancient, felt knowing, felt like it saw every secret Gareth ever buried, and didn't care about any of them. Gareth realized he wasn't standing before something human. The thought came clear and cold. This wasn't a person in a costume, wasn't a hallucination from exhaustion, wasn't a dream he'd wake from when his alarm went off. This was real, standing 15 feet away, glowing softly in the breathing mist. Real and impossible. Real and here. The hum continued. The mist pulsed. The light bent reality. And Gareth Monroe, 46-year-old forest ranger who thought God had forgotten him, stood face to face with something that shouldn't exist. His mind tried to process, failed, tried again. The being waited patiently, like it had all the time in the world, like it had been waiting for Gareth specifically, for this exact night, this exact moment. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and confusion, Gareth felt something he hadn't felt in years. Recognition, like his soul remembered something his mind forgot. The being tilted its head slightly, almost a nod, and the night changed forever. The being approached with softness. Each step was deliberate, careful. The gray figure moved through the mist without disturbing it, feet touching ground that barely registered the contact. Silent, graceful, impossible. Gareth tried to step back, but something kept him in place. Not physically. Nothing grabbed him, but his body wouldn't obey. Like his muscles received two commands: run from his brain, stay from somewhere deeper. The deeper command won. He felt his sadness being read like an open book. The sensation was intimate, uncomfortable, like standing naked under bright lights while someone examined every scar. The being's black eyes moved across him, not looking at his body, looking into him, seeing everything. The visitor perceived the spiritual weight he carried, the heaviness he'd carried for years, the burden he pretended wasn't there during the day, the weight that crushed him at night in the cabin. The being saw it, understood it, and didn't turn away. No judgment, no pity, just recognition. Gareth remembered the lost faith of his childhood, Sunday school in the church basement, the smell of crayons and old carpet, Mrs. Patterson reading stories about Jesus, about miracles, about love that conquered everything. He remembered believing those stories, actually believing them. When did that stop? He remembered the prayers he'd stopped saying. Now I lay me down to sleep. Every night as a kid, eyes squeezed shut, hands folded, believing someone listened. The prayers got shorter as he grew older, less frequent, more desperate, until one day he realized he was just talking to himself, and he stopped. He remembered the emptiness he'd tried to ignore for years, the void that opened when faith died, when belief crumbled, when God went silent, or worse, when Gareth realized God had never spoken at all. The emptiness grew, spread, became normal. The being spoke without moving its lips. You have distanced yourself from yourself. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. You have distanced yourself from yourself, not from God, not from faith, from himself. The words touched ancient wounds, wounds he'd covered with work, with routine, with mechanical patrols. The being's message peeled back the covering, made him look at what he'd been avoiding. He had abandoned himself. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being Gareth, stopped being the person who felt deeply, who cared about meaning, who believed in something bigger. He'd become a function, a role, forest ranger, but not a person, not really. He recognized the deep exhaustion he carried in his chest, soul tiredness, the kind that comes from living disconnected from yourself, from going through motions while your spirit slowly starves, from pretending you're fine while something inside dies quietly. The entire forest seemed to listen to him from within, the trees, the earth, the mist, all of it aware, witnessing this moment, not judging, just holding space. Like the forest had been waiting for this, waiting for him to be seen, for him to see himself. The being pointed to the illuminated clearing behind him. Gareth turned. The clearing hadn't been there before. He knew this trail, knew every inch. There was no clearing here, but there it was, glowing, pulsing, real, a doorway that shouldn't exist. Gareth felt a silent calling. It came from inside his chest, a pull, a recognition, like his body knew something his mind didn't. The clearing called to him the way home calls after a long journey, the way rest calls after exhaustion, undeniable, irresistible. It was as if his soul remembered something forgotten. You have already been to Eden, not will go, have been, past tense. Like this wasn't a first visit, like his soul had walked this path before birth, before this life. The thought should have been crazy, but it felt true, and he decided to follow that mysterious presence. The decision came quietly, no dramatic moment, just a simple choice, a step forward, then another. His feet moved. The being turned and began walking toward the clearing. Gareth followed. Something in him knew this mattered, knew that whatever happened next would change everything. Maybe that's why he'd been so empty, so burned out, because some part of him had been waiting for this, dying so he could be reborn. The being walked ahead, patient, certain. Gareth followed through the mist, through the breathing vapor, through the impossible night. His shadow stretched behind him, long, dark, but ahead was light. The clearing grew brighter as they approached. The hum grew stronger. The air grew warmer. Gareth's heart pounded, not from fear anymore, from anticipation, recognition, coming home. The being reached the edge and stopped, turned. Those black liquid eyes looked at Gareth with something that might have been compassion, might have been welcome. Gareth took a breath, maybe the last breath of his old life, the last moment of being the man who'd forgotten his own light. The being waited. The clearing pulsed, and Gareth stepped forward into the impossible. The clearing was covered with light that pulsed like a heart, rhythmic, alive, expanding and contracting in slow waves. The light didn't come from a source. It was the source, pure luminescence that filled the space without creating shadows. In the center, a living membrane moved like luminous water, vertical, suspended in midair, 8 feet tall, 5 feet wide. The surface rippled constantly, gentle undulations that caught light and refracted it into colors without names. Blues that weren't quite blue, golds that contained something beyond gold. The being indicated the portal with a gesture. One long finger pointed. The movement was economical, precise, the meaning clear. This is the way. The being's face remained calm, patient, like it had all the time in existence. Gareth breathed deeply, fighting against the fear. His rational mind screamed warnings. This isn't real, don't touch it. But another part wanted to move forward, needed to. The two parts warred inside him. When he touched the surface, he felt warmth and serenity. His hand extended almost without permission, trembling. The moment his skin made contact, everything changed. Warmth spread up his arm, into his chest, through his entire body. Not burning, comforting, like being wrapped in sunlight, like being held by something infinitely gentle. The fear didn't disappear, but it transformed, became small compared to the overwhelming sense of rightness. The light enveloped his entire body. The membrane responded to his touch, spread, expanded, covered him like water flowing upward. Gareth gasped, but there was no panic. The light felt safe, felt like coming home after being lost for years. His body remained visible, but it glowed now. Distant sounds echoed like ancient memories, music that wasn't quite music, voices that weren't quite voices, harmonies from the beginning of time, or the end. Gareth heard laughter, heard crying, heard joy and sorrow woven together. The sounds felt familiar, like he'd heard them before, long ago. The air seemed lighter than in the physical world. Breathing became easier. Each inhale filled him more completely, like breathing pure oxygen, pure life. His lungs expanded. The weight he'd carried lifted slightly, not gone, but lighter. The portal pulled him gently inside. No force, no violence, just an invitation his body accepted, like stepping into a warm bath. The membrane welcomed him, drew him in. Direction stopped making sense. He crossed through without pain, only with astonishment. The transition was seamless. One moment in the clearing, the next moment elsewhere. The crossing took no time, took forever. Both were true. Gareth looked at his hands. Still his hands, but different, more vivid, more present. On the other side was a space that didn't obey Earth's laws. No ground, no sky, no horizon, just space. Infinite space that somehow felt contained. The light was everywhere and nowhere. It existed as environment, as atmosphere. Geometry was wrong, or right in a way it had never been. Gareth saw angles that couldn't exist, distances that changed depending on where he looked. The space breathed, expanded and contracted, alive, aware. The light seemed alive, conscious, present, not metaphorically alive, actually alive. The light moved with intention, responded to his presence, acknowledged him. It had awareness, had personality, had kindness woven into its essence. Words felt crude here, unnecessary. The telepathic being walked beside him. When Head had entered, Gareth hadn't noticed, but the gray figure stood next to him now. Solid, real, a guide in this impossible place. Infinite depth in those eyes, infinite patience. Gareth felt his mind open beyond fear. The opening was subtle, like a door he didn't know existed suddenly visible. The fear was still there, but it became distant. One voice among many instead of the only voice. Other things emerged. Curiosity, wonder, awe, recognition. That recognition again. Stronger now, like meeting an old friend you'd forgotten. Like remembering a dream upon waking. Except the details weren't fading. They were sharpening, coming into focus. The portal closed behind them like a serene wave. Gareth turned, watched the membrane seal, watched the ripples spread and still, watched the connection to Pine Hollow disappear. He should have panicked, should have demanded to go back, but he didn't. Because standing here, in this space that couldn't exist, surrounded by living light that knew him, Gareth felt more at home than he'd felt in 20 years. The being looked at him, waited, and Gareth understood the journey was just beginning. Gareth entered a vast space without defined floor or sky. He stood on something, but not ground, not surface, just standing, supported by nothing visible. The space stretched infinitely in all directions, yet it didn't feel empty. It felt full, dense with possibility. The landscape changed according to his feelings. When he felt wonder, colors brightened. When uncertainty crept in, shadows gathered at the edges. The space responded instantly, like it was reading his emotional state and translating it into environment. Living architecture built from feeling. Trees appeared where he placed his attention. Gareth looked left, thought about the Douglas firs from Pine Hollow, and there they were, growing, manifesting, not exactly like earth trees, more like the idea of trees, the essence of treeness, green and brown and alive, but also translucent, also light. He looked right. The trees faded, new ones emerged. The light responded to what he thought. When he thought about warmth, the light glowed golden. When he thought about peace, it shifted to soft blue. The correlation was direct, immediate. His consciousness and the environment weren't separate. They were connected, interacting, dancing together. This wasn't a place he visited. This was a place he created. The being explained, "This is your inner garden." The words came gently into his mind. Your inner garden, not the garden, not a garden. Yours, personal, unique, built from everything Gareth had ever felt, thought, experienced. Every moment of his 46 years contributed to this space, and he'd never known it existed. Gareth saw a shadow form before him. It emerged slowly, coalescing from the air itself, dark but not threatening, human-shaped but indistinct. About his height, his build, the shadow stood 15 feet away, watching, waiting. It was the unlived self, hidden by exhaustion and pain. Gareth understood without being told. This was the version of himself he'd abandoned, the part that wanted to feel, to connect, to believe, the part he'd buried under burnout and routine and spiritual numbness. The person he could have been, should have been, chose not to be. The figure observed with eyes of absence. Where eyes should be, there was only emptiness, hollowness, The shadow self looked at Gareth with a gaze that said everything. You left me behind. You forgot me. You pretended I didn't exist. And it was true. Gareth felt compassion for himself. The emotion surprised him. He expected shame, expected guilt, expected self-recrimination for wasting years, for giving up, for letting his spirit die. But what came instead was tenderness, sadness for the man he'd become, for the pain that had driven him to disconnect, for the loneliness that had convinced him numbness was survival. He'd done the best he could, and it hadn't been enough, and that was okay. The being said, "Consciousness creates form." Simple words, profound truth. Everything here was consciousness made visible. The trees, the light, the shadow self standing before him. All of it emerged from awareness, from attention, from the creative power of mind meeting reality. Gareth had been creating his whole life, just unconsciously, creating emptiness, creating isolation, creating burnout, because that's what his consciousness focused on. But consciousness could create other things too. The garden trembled with each of his emotions. When compassion rose, the space brightened slightly. When sadness touched him, gentle rain appeared, warm drops that felt like tears. When understanding dawned, the horizon expanded. Every feeling rippled outward, reshaping reality. He had more power than he'd ever imagined. The space exhaled, lost memories. Gareth smelled his mother's perfume, heard his father's laugh, saw himself at 8 years old, praying before bed with absolute faith, saw himself at 16, questioning, at 25, doubting, at 38, giving up. The garden held it all. Nothing was lost, just buried, just waiting to be remembered. He realized he had ignored his own heart. For years, maybe decades, he'd stopped listening to what mattered, stopped paying attention to his deepest needs, convinced himself that work was enough, that routine was enough, that surviving was the same as living. His heart had been calling the whole time, whispering, pleading, begging for attention, and he turned away. The shadow began to dissipate, slowly, like fog burning off in morning sun. The dark figure became translucent, the emptiness in its eyes filled with light. Gareth watched his unlived self transform, not disappearing, integrating, coming home. The shadow wasn't separate from him, never had been. It was part of him, the part he'd rejected. And now, finally, he was welcoming it back, accepting all of himself, the pain and the hope, the doubt and the faith, the exhaustion and the longing. All of it belonged. And the garden became more luminous around him. Colors intensified, the light sang. Trees became more solid and more ethereal simultaneously. The space celebrated, like it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for Gareth to remember himself completely, to become whole. He stood in his inner garden, vast, responsive, alive, and understood something fundamental. This place had always existed. He'd been here his entire life without knowing it. Every thought shaped it. Every emotion colored it. Every choice planted seeds. The question wasn't whether he had an inner garden. The question was, what would he grow here? The being watched silently, patient, allowing Gareth to absorb the revelation. Those liquid black eyes reflected the brightening space, reflected Gareth himself, more complete than he'd been in decades. The shadow was gone. The light remained, and Gareth felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. Hope. Real hope. Not wishful thinking, not desperate pleading, but certainty that change was possible, that growth was happening, that the deadness inside him could transform into life, was already transforming. He looked at the being. Gratitude filled his chest. No words came. None were needed. The being inclined its head slightly. Acknowledgement, encouragement, and Gareth knew there was more to see. The being approached and lightly touched Gareth's shoulder. The contact was gentle, barely pressure, but the effect was immediate. Gareth's mind opened like a door he'd never noticed. His consciousness expanded, boundaries dissolved, and vision came. A wave of images crossed through his mind, not like memory, not like imagination, direct experience, pure knowing. Gareth saw without his eyes, understood without thinking. The images didn't arrive sequentially. They arrived all at once, complete and whole, overwhelming, perfect. He saw a golden field without time, endless, radiant. The grass, If it was grass, swayed in a breeze that carried music. Light streamed from everywhere and nowhere. The sky was colors that Earth doesn't have. The ground felt solid and dreamlike simultaneously. This was a place beyond place, a state beyond state. Children of light walked in silence, beings, souls, consciousnesses in form. They looked human but weren't, looked like children but weren't. They radiated innocence, joy, pure awareness. They moved through the golden field with purpose and playfulness, learning, growing, becoming. Gareth watched them, felt their presence, and something in him stirred. Gareth recognized the place without explanation. He'd never been here, except he had. Some part of him knew this field, knew the light, knew the feeling of absolute safety and unconditional love that permeated everything. Cellular memory, soul memory, deeper than thought. The voice echoed, "This is Eden, not in the past, but in frequency." The being's words arrived with weight, with truth. Eden wasn't a historical location, wasn't a garden that existed 6,000 years ago. It was a state of consciousness, a frequency, a way of being, and it existed now, always, eternally. The being showed souls choosing their lives before birth. Gareth saw them, luminous beings reviewing possibilities, examining potential timelines, selecting challenges that would help them grow, choosing parents, choosing circumstances, choosing pain because pain creates opportunity for compassion. They chose freely, joyfully, with full awareness. Gareth realized he had been there before his own existence. The knowing hit him hard. He'd stood in that golden field. He'd been one of those children of light. He'd chosen his life, his parents, his struggles, his path as a forest ranger, his burnout, his spiritual crisis. All of it selected, all of it purposeful. Emotion took hold of him without warning. Tears came, not from sadness, from recognition, from the profound relief of remembering. He'd been so lost, so convinced he was abandoned, so certain God had forgotten him. But he'd never been abandoned. He'd just forgotten where he came from, forgotten what he was, forgotten the agreement he'd made with himself before entering this life. He saw love as the architecture of everything, not metaphorical love, structural love, the force that holds reality together, that creates, that sustains, that transforms. Love wasn't an emotion. Love was the fundamental frequency, the base code, the creative principle. Everything was made of love, including him. Consciousness as the soil where everything germinates. Seeds planted in consciousness become reality. Thoughts grow into beliefs. Beliefs grow into experiences. Experiences grow into lives. The golden field was pure consciousness. And from that consciousness, all possibilities emerged. Gareth understood. He'd been planting seeds his whole life, seeds of exhaustion, seeds of isolation, seeds of abandonment, and they'd grown exactly as planted. But he could plant different seeds now. Eden wasn't a place, it was an inner state. The revelation completed itself. Eden had never been geographical, never been lost in history. It was always accessible, always here, a frequency he could tune into, a state he could embody, by choosing love, by choosing awareness, by choosing to remember. The being repeated, "Eden is not reached, Eden is remembered." The words landed perfectly. You don't get to Eden, you don't earn Eden, you don't find Eden somewhere else. You remember that you're already there, that you've always been there. That separation was illusion, amnesia, not exile. Gareth felt profound recognition. Every cell in his body responded. Every particle of his being said yes. This was true. This was real. This mattered more than anything he'd learned in 46 years of living. He was not separate from the divine, never had been, never could be. And silent tears mixed with the light. They fell from his eyes, became luminous, dissolved into the space around him. His grief and his joy intertwined. His pain and his healing merged. He cried for the years lost to forgetting. He cried for the grace of remembering. The being stood beside him, silent, present, allowing the moment its full weight. The golden field faded from vision. The children of light receded, but the knowing remained. Eden lived inside him, had always lived inside him. And Gareth Monroe, 46-year-old forest ranger from Oregon, stood in his inner garden and finally understood. He was home. The being raised its hand and the space began to shine. Brighter than before, the light intensified without becoming harsh. It gathered, concentrated, formed itself into something new. Gareth watched the luminescence coalesce, watched it take shape, watched it become someone. A figure of light appeared before Gareth, tall, radiant, composed entirely of living brilliance. The form was humanoid but transcendent, made of the same light that filled the garden, made of consciousness itself. The figure stood with gentle authority, with presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Gareth knew immediately who this was. It was Jesus, not physical, but radiant consciousness, not the Jesus from paintings, not the pale figure with blue eyes from Sunday school books. This was essence, pure awareness, the Christ consciousness that had walked Earth 2,000 years ago, now visible in its true form, light given shape, love given presence. The face was serene and without defined boundaries. Features existed but shifted. The face was every face and no face. Compassionate eyes that were also light. A gentle smile that was also energy. Gareth could see the form clearly, yet couldn't describe it. Like trying to remember a dream upon waking. Beautiful beyond words. Familiar beyond memory. Gareth felt his chest open like never before. Something cracked. A wall he'd built over decades. A barrier between him and the divine. Between him and love. Between him and himself. It didn't shatter violently. It dissolved, melted, and his heart, his actual heart, expanded. Space opened inside him he didn't know existed. The light spoke without words, only presence, no voice, no sound, just being. The Christ figure communicated through pure existence, through the quality of attention it gave, through the frequency it emanated. Gareth received understanding directly, not through ears, through his entire being. Telepathy beyond telepathy, communion. Love emanated as a continuous wave, constant, unwavering, like standing near a warm fire, like being held by someone who sees everything wrong with you and loves you anyway. The love wasn't emotional, wasn't sentimental, it was fundamental, structural. The same love that held atoms together, that made stars burn, that created universes. And it was directed at him, at Gareth, completely. The vision showed simple gestures transforming the world. Images flowed from the Christ figure, a hand extended to help someone stand, a word of kindness to someone suffering, a moment of listening to someone forgotten. Simple acts, nothing dramatic, nothing that would make history books, but each gesture sent ripples through reality, changed timelines, elevated frequencies, healed wounds that hadn't even formed yet. Each act of compassion was a vibrational seed. Gareth saw it clearly. Compassion wasn't just nice, wasn't just moral, it was creative. It planted something real, something that grew, something that changed the fabric of existence. Every kind thought, every generous action, every moment of genuine care. Seeds, all of them seeds, growing gardens in consciousness. Gareth understood the teaching without effort. It wasn't complex, wasn't theological, wasn't about rules or rituals or religious doctrine. It was simple, profound, direct. Love is the power. Consciousness creates. Choose compassion, and you change reality. That's what Jesus taught. That's what Jesus demonstrated. That's what Jesus was. Jesus didn't show religion, he showed return to the interior. The realization struck Gareth fully. Jesus hadn't come to create churches, hadn't come to establish institutions, hadn't come to write rules. He came to remind humanity of what they'd forgotten, that the kingdom of heaven is within, that God isn't separate, that every person carries divine creative power. Return to your inner garden. Remember who you are. That was the message. The being explained. He came to remind the path of unity. The gray figure's voice joined the revelation. Jesus came to heal separation, to show that the gap between human and divine was illusion, that you and God aren't two things trying to connect. You're one thing that forgot itself. Unity, oneness, home. Gareth knelt, overcome with reverence. His knees hit the non-ground, his head bowed, not from religious training, not from obligation, from pure response to presence, from recognition of something infinitely greater than himself that was also intimately himself. Awe, gratitude, surrender. The light touched his mind with gentleness. The Christ figure reached out, not physically, energetically. The luminous hand extended toward Gareth's bowed head, and when it made contact, before it made contact, Gareth felt himself known, seen, accepted, loved. Every mistake, every failure, every moment of despair, seen and loved, completely, and sacred silence enveloped him completely. No sound, no thought, no movement, just presence, pure, undiluted presence. Gareth existed in that silence, floated in it, dissolved into it. The Christ figure, the gray being, the garden, himself, all of it held in sacred quiet. The silence spoke louder than any words, said everything that needed saying, communicated truths that language couldn't touch. Gareth remained kneeling, tears streaming, heart open, mind still. For the first time in decades, he felt peace, real peace, not the absence of problems, not the numbness of exhaustion, but the deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong, doing exactly what you're meant to do, being exactly who you are. The Christ figure began to fade, slowly, gently. The light didn't disappear, but receded, returned to the general luminescence of the garden. But something remained, a warmth in Gareth's chest, a knowing in his bones. Jesus wasn't gone, had never been gone, would never be gone, because Jesus wasn't a person somewhere else. Jesus was consciousness, and consciousness is everywhere, in everything, in everyone, in Gareth himself. The path wasn't to Jesus, the path was with Jesus, as Jesus, embodying the same love, the same awareness, the same creative compassion. Gareth stayed kneeling. The being stood beside him, patient, allowing the integration, allowing the moment its full weight. The garden pulsed with gentle light. Trees swayed in an invisible breeze. Everything felt sacred. Everything was sacred. Gareth finally understood what his mother had been trying to teach him all those years ago in Sunday school. Not the stories themselves, but the truth beneath them, the reality the stories pointed toward. God wasn't watching from heaven. God was breathing through his lungs, seeing through his eyes, living through his life. He'd never been separate, never been abandoned, never been alone. He'd just forgotten, and now he remembered. Gareth felt the vision slowly dissolve. The Christ figure faded completely now, became light again, became space again. The intensity of the experience receded like tide going out, but what it left behind remained, changed, permanent. The being approached with absolute calm. Those liquid black eyes held understanding, held compassion. The gray figure moved closer, stood directly in front of Gareth, and when it spoke, the words came with the weight of truth. "Your emptiness was homesickness for Eden," it said. The sentence landed perfectly. Gareth's chest tightened. Yes, that's exactly what it was. The void he'd carried for years, the numbness, the burnout, the spiritual death, not depression, not weakness, homesickness. His soul longing for something it remembered but couldn't name. Fear was only the echo of separation. The being continued. Fear wasn't evil, wasn't wrong. It was just a signal, a symptom, the natural response to believing you're alone, to believing you're disconnected from source, from love, from God. Every fear traced back to that one lie, that separation is real. Gareth saw his entire life in small scenes. Images flashed through his awareness, quick, vivid, moments he'd lived but never truly examined. His life played before him, not chronologically, not completely, just significant moments, patterns, repeated choices. He saw repetitive days on solitary patrols, walking the same trails, year after year, the routine that had felt like prison, the isolation that had felt like punishment. But now he saw it differently, saw himself choosing it, choosing safety over connection, choosing predictability over risk, protecting himself from more disappointment, more pain. He saw nights when he believed he was abandoned, sitting in the cabin, staring at darkness, convinced God had forgotten him, convinced he didn't matter, convinced his life was meaningless. The despair felt so real in those moments, felt so true, but it was just forgetting, just amnesia, just separation consciousness. He saw how he distanced himself from the sacred, stopped praying, stopped believing, stopped looking for meaning. Each choice made sense at the time. Self-protection, self-preservation. But each choice also built walls, created distance, reinforced the illusion that he was alone, that nothing mattered, that nothing was sacred. The being explained that emotions shape realities. Direct teaching now. Clear instruction. Your emotional state creates your experience, not metaphorically. Actually, fear creates more fear. Despair creates more despair. The frequency you emanate becomes the reality you inhabit. You're not a victim of circumstances. You're a creator of them. Guilt and discouragement create internal darkness. Gareth saw it. The years of guilt for losing faith, the discouragement from believing he'd failed. Those emotions created the darkness he lived in, created the emptiness, the burnout, the spiritual death, not as punishment, as natural consequence. Dark emotions create dark experience. Compassion and forgiveness restore lost paths. But, and this changed everything, different emotions create different realities. Compassion for himself, forgiveness for his choices, acceptance of his journey. Those emotions could restore what seemed lost, could rebuild what seemed broken, could illuminate what seemed dark. Gareth breathed deeply as he understood. The breath came from his core, filled his lungs completely. He got it, really got it. He wasn't trapped, wasn't doomed, wasn't permanently broken. He'd just been creating from fear instead of love, and he could choose differently. Right now, this moment, the light responded to his feeling of acceptance. The garden brightened, trees grew more vibrant, colors intensified. The space itself celebrated his understanding, his shift, his choice to accept rather than resist, to forgive rather than condemn. Reality responding to consciousness, immediately, perfectly. Fear lost strength inside him, not gone completely. Gareth could still feel it, but smaller now, quieter, like a voice in the background instead of the dominant narrative. Fear had ruled him for so long, driven his choices, shaped his life, but it didn't have to anymore. He could acknowledge it without obeying it, and profound calm took over his entire body. Peace descended, settled into his bones, relaxed muscles he didn't know were tense, quieted thoughts he didn't know were racing. The calm wasn't passive, wasn't resignation. It was active, powerful. The peace of understanding, the peace of remembering, the peace of coming home. Gareth stood, his legs steady, his heart open, his mind clear. The being watched with approval, with encouragement. The garden pulsed around them, alive, responsive, ready. Everything had changed, and nothing had changed. He was still Gareth Monroe, still 46, still a forest ranger, still carried scars and wounds and years of choices. But now he remembered Eden, remembered unity, remembered that fear was just forgetting and love was just remembering. The being placed a hand on his shoulder, warm, solid, real, and Gareth knew the deepest truth. He'd never been broken, just asleep, and now, finally, he was waking up. The being guided Gareth through the luminous garden. They walked together, side by side. The gray figure moved with effortless grace. Gareth followed. His steps felt lighter than they'd felt in years. The weight he'd carried was gone, not forgotten, transformed, used as fuel for growth instead of burden. Each step altered the space around them. Where Gareth stepped, flowers bloomed, not earth flowers, something else. Luminous petals that sang in colors, stems that were light made solid, beauty that responded to his presence, to his frequency, to his shift. The garden celebrated him, welcomed the new version of himself. The light reacted to his emotional state. When gratitude rose in his chest, the light warmed. Gold tones spread through the space. When wonder filled him, blues and violets appeared. When peace settled over him, soft white luminescence expanded. Direct feedback, immediate correlation, consciousness and environment in constant conversation. Gareth realized his thoughts were living seeds. Every thought, every belief, every mental pattern, seeds planted in the soil of consciousness. Some grew into beauty, some grew into suffering, but all of them grew into something. Nothing was neutral, nothing was powerless. His mind had been planting his entire life, mostly unconsciously. Now he was aware. The being said, "Christ lives in every choice of love." The words settled deep. Christ wasn't a person 2,000 years gone. Christ was a frequency, a state, a choice. Every time Gareth chose compassion over judgment, love over fear, connection over isolation, Christ lived, right there, in that moment, through him. Gareth remembered his childhood and the old prayers. Now I lay me down to sleep. His mother's voice reading Bible stories. The feeling of safety in those moments. The certainty that God listened, that love was real, that everything would be okay. He'd lost that certainty, but it had never really left, just gotten buried. He felt his heart reignite with tenderness. Warmth spread through his chest, different from before. Not the desperate longing of the empty years, but gentle affection for himself, for his journey, for the child he'd been, for the man he'd become, for the person he was becoming. Tenderness for all of it, every version, every moment. He understood he'd never truly been alone. The years of isolation were real. The loneliness was real. But the aloneness? That was illusion. God had been there the whole time. In the trees he'd walked among, in the air he'd breathed, in the silence he'd feared, in himself, always in himself, closer than breath, nearer than thought. Each act of kindness was a path back to himself. The being showed him images, small moments from his ranger years, helping a lost hiker, saving an injured deer, warning campers about fire danger. Acts he'd dismissed as just doing his job, but they were more. Each act of care reconnected him to his heart, to his humanity, to his divinity. The path home was paved with kindness. The inner forest flourished with the new vibration. Trees grew taller, flowers multiplied, light intensified. The garden responded to Gareth's shift. His elevated frequency created elevated environment. Beauty creating more beauty. Love generating more love. Upward spiral instead of downward. Growth instead of decay. The being observed with tranquil benevolence. Those liquid black eyes reflected approval. Not judgment. Not evaluation. Just recognition. Acknowledgement of Gareth's transformation. Of his willingness to see. To change. To remember. The being had guided countless souls through this awakening. And each one mattered. Each one was celebrated. Gareth felt his soul lighter. Physically lighter, like he'd put down a massive backpack he'd carried for decades. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, his posture straightened. The spiritual weight had lifted, not because circumstances changed, because consciousness changed. The garden reflected this transformation. What had been shadow-filled corners now glowed. What had been barren patches now bloomed. What had been uncertain boundaries now expanded into infinite possibility. The garden showed him his own inner state. And his inner state was healing, growing, awakening. The inner shadow had disappeared. Gareth looked for it. The unlived self, the abandoned parts, the rejected pieces. Gone, not destroyed, integrated, welcomed home, made whole. He was complete now. All pieces present, all aspects acknowledged. Nothing left in exile, nothing left in darkness. A new clarity arose within him. Sharp, precise, undeniable. Gareth saw his life with fresh eyes, saw his choices, saw his patterns, saw his path forward. The clarity didn't come from thinking, came from knowing, from the deep wisdom that emerges when consciousness aligns with truth. He knew what to do now, not every detail, but the direction, the essence, the way. The being stopped walking, turned to face him. The garden pulsed around them, light and life and love made visible. Gareth met those ancient eyes, grateful, changed, ready for what came next, ready to return, ready to live what he'd learned. The being gestured back toward where they'd come from, toward the membrane, the portal, the doorway between worlds. Time to go back, time to integrate, time to demonstrate. But Gareth wasn't the same person who'd crossed through. That person had died in the garden. This person, this aware, awakened, remembering person, was new, born from light, baptized in love, resurrected in consciousness. The being smiled, or something like a smile. The expression held centuries of wisdom, eons of patience, infinite compassion for the human journey, for the forgetting and the remembering, for the fall and the rise, for souls like Gareth who'd lost themselves and found themselves again. They walked toward the portal together, each step a completion, Each breath a integration. The garden had done its work. The revelation had been received. The transformation had occurred. Now came the return. The application. The living proof. Gareth glanced back once, saw the garden in all its glory, his inner landscape, his true home, his Eden. He'd carry this with him, always, not as memory, as reality, as frequency, as state of being. The garden wasn't a place he visited, it was a place he was, and he'd never forget again. The being stopped before him with a compassionate gaze. They stood near the membrane. The portal pulsed gently, waiting, patient. The journey through the garden was complete. But before returning, words needed to be spoken. Truth needed to be transmitted. Final teaching before departure. You will carry Eden with you, the voice said. Not in your memory, in your being, in your frequency, in your consciousness. Eden isn't something you visit and leave. Eden is something you become and remain. The state of awareness, the vibration of love, the remembering of unity. Gareth felt truth in the vibration of the phrase. The words resonated, literally. His body hummed with recognition. His cells agreed, his soul confirmed. Yes, this was true, this was real, this was the key to everything. Eden was portable, internal, eternal. Each emotion is a portal to the sacred. The being continued teaching. Every feeling you experience opens a doorway. Joy opens one door. Grief opens another. Gratitude opens a third. Even fear and anger, when met with awareness, become portals. Gateways to deeper understanding, to greater compassion. Nothing wasted. Everything useful. All emotions as teachers. He understood the power of planting conscious choices. This was it. The practical application. The how-to. Every moment offered choice. React from fear or respond from love. Contract or expand. Forget or remember. Each choice planted a seed. Each seed grew a reality. Conscious choice was the most powerful tool humans possessed. The being showed that no one is separated from source. Images filled Gareth's mind. Billions of humans on Earth. Each one believing they're alone. Each one forgetting their connection. But separation was impossible. Like a wave believing it's separate from the ocean. Like a ray believing it's separate from the sun. Different expressions of the same source. Always connected. Always one. He explained that time doesn't run, it blooms. Time wasn't a river flowing one direction. Time was a garden where all moments exist simultaneously. Past, present, future, all blooming now, all accessible now. Linear time was perception. Useful, but not ultimate. This explained how Gareth had already been to Eden before birth, before life. Because before and after were human concepts, not cosmic truth. Gareth saw his future possibilities emerge as soft light. Multiple timelines, multiple potentials, some bright, some dim, some vibrant with color. Each one a potential future based on choices he'd make. Nothing fixed, nothing predetermined. All of it responsive to consciousness. Free will wasn't illusion, it was everything. He saw himself returning to the forest, continuing as ranger, but different, awake, aware, seeing the sacred in every tree, every animal, every moment. That timeline glowed bright. He saw himself sharing what he'd learned, carefully, gently, not preaching, demonstrating. That timeline glowed brighter. The journey wasn't punishment, it was growth, the being's final teaching, the burnout, the emptiness, the spiritual death. None of it was punishment for failure. All of it was catalyst for awakening. Difficult? Yes. Painful? Absolutely. But purposeful. The soul chose growth over comfort, expansion over safety, evolution over stagnation. The being touched his forehead lightly. Warm contact, gentle pressure, energy transferred. Not power given, power activated. Gareth already had everything he needed. Always had. The touch just reminded him, confirmed it, sealed it, like a benediction, like a blessing, like a welcome home. Remember, unity never left you. The final words, the ultimate truth, the key to everything. Unity wasn't something Gareth needed to achieve, wasn't something he needed to earn, wasn't something he needed to find. It had never left. He'd just forgotten. And now he remembered. And remembering changed everything. Gareth felt deep warmth in his chest, spreading outward, through his arms, his legs, his entire body. The warmth was love, was recognition, was homecoming. His heart, his physical heart, felt different, expanded, open, alive, beating in rhythm with the garden, with the being, with Source itself. The portal behind them began to pulse again, stronger now, faster. Time to return, time to integrate, time to demonstrate. The membrane rippled, called, invited. The doorway between worlds reopened, ready to receive him, ready to send him home. The farewell was silent but complete. No dramatic goodbye, no last-minute instructions, no promises to meet again. Just presence, just acknowledgement, just love. The being stepped back, inclined its head slightly, honored Gareth's journey, honored Gareth himself, and Gareth knew he would return different. Not just different, transformed. The man who'd entered the portal didn't exist anymore, died in the garden, dissolved in revelation. This person, aware, awakened, remembering, was new. Same body, same name, same life circumstances, but new consciousness, new frequency, new way of being. He bowed to the being, gratitude overwhelming, no words adequate, just the gesture, the acknowledgement, the honoring of what had been given, what had been remembered, what had been restored. The being watched, those ancient eyes reflecting infinite compassion. Gareth turned toward the membrane, took a breath. The luminous water rippled, waited. He stepped forward. The light enveloped him. The warmth surrounded him. The transition began. One last look back. The garden, the being, the light, home, and then crossing, returning, emerging, back to Pine Hollow, back to Oregon, back to Earth, but carrying Eden within, always, forever, eternally. Light enveloped Gareth and brought him back to the trail. The transition was gentle, seamless. One moment surrounded by the garden's luminescence, the next moment standing on familiar ground. Pine Hollow, Oregon, Earth. The membrane released him softly, like a mother setting down a sleeping child. He was home, but home felt different now. The cold night of Pine Hollow seemed like another world, and it was. Same physical location, same trees, same trail, but everything had changed. Or rather, Gareth had changed, and that changed everything. The forest that had felt like a prison now felt like sanctuary. The darkness that had felt oppressive now felt peaceful. Same place, different eyes. The hum had ceased completely, silent now. The deep vibration that had called him, that had announced the impossible, gone. The forest returned to its normal sounds. Wind through branches, distant owl calls, his own breathing. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full, pregnant with meaning, the kind of silence that holds everything. The mist dissipated like a removed veil. Gareth watched it happen. The fog that had breathed, that had parted for the gray being. Now it simply evaporated. Natural, normal, like morning mist burning off in sunlight, revealing the trail ahead, the familiar path, the known world. But nothing was merely familiar anymore. Gareth breathed the humid air with new meaning. Each inhale felt sacred. The moisture, the oxygen, the particles of forest entering his lungs, all of it communion, all of it connection. His body exchanging molecules with trees, with earth, with atmosphere, not separate, never separate. Breathing was prayer. Living was worship. The forest seemed alive in a different way. Not different because the forest changed. Different because Gareth could finally see what had always been true. The consciousness in every tree, the awareness in every stone, the intelligence organizing every ecosystem. Life wasn't something the forest had. Life was what the forest was, and he was part of it, woven into it. One thread in an infinite tapestry. He walked with firmer steps, confident, grounded, present. His boots hit the trail with certainty. No more mechanical pacing, no more sleepwalking through shifts. Each step intentional, each movement aware. His body felt stronger, more aligned, more his. Walking meditation, walking prayer. The emptiness he'd carried before no longer existed. Gone. Not suppressed, not ignored. Actually gone. Dissolved in the light of Eden. Transformed by remembering. The void had been filled, not with something external, with recognition of what had always been internal. Fullness, completeness, wholeness. The memory of Eden pulsed within his chest, not fading, not becoming distant, present, active, alive, like a flame burning in his heart, warm, constant, unquenchable. The garden existed in him now, the golden field, the Christ consciousness, the being's teachings, all of it carried forward. Portable paradise, internal infinity. Gareth looked at the dark sky and smiled. Stars visible between clouds, the familiar constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, the same stars he'd seen thousands of times during night patrols. But tonight they seemed to smile back, seemed to wink, seemed to say, "We've been waiting for you to remember." And he laughed. Actual laughter. How long since he'd laughed? The faith he'd lost had returned renewed. Not the childhood faith. That was gone forever. This was different, deeper. Not belief in doctrines, not adherence to rules, but direct knowing, experiential certainty. He'd seen, he'd felt, he'd remembered. Faith wasn't believing without evidence. Faith was trusting the evidence of transformation. He understood God had never distanced himself from him. The revelation settled fully. All those years of feeling abandoned, forgotten, invisible to the divine, all of it misunderstanding, misinterpretation, projection. God had been present every single moment, in every breath, every heartbeat, every step through the forest, never absent, never distant, never silent. Only his consciousness had closed. That was the truth. The simple, humbling truth. Gareth had shut the door, not intentionally, not maliciously, but through pain, through disappointment, through the slow accumulation of grief and exhaustion and despair. He'd closed himself off, from God, from love, from himself. Now the door was open again, wide open, fully open, permanently open. The barriers dissolved, the walls crumbled, the separation healed. Gareth stood in the cold Oregon night, fully present, fully aware, fully alive, connected to everything, part of everything, one with everything. And the path back to love was clear, not complicated, not distant, not requiring years of study or practice or purification, just choice, moment by moment choice. Choose love over fear, choose compassion over judgment, choose connection over isolation. The path was simple, had always been simple. He'd just forgotten how to see it. Gareth continued down the trail, heading back to the ranger station, to his truck, eventually to his cabin. But the destination didn't matter. The walking mattered, the presence mattered, the awareness mattered. Each step a return, each breath a homecoming. The forest witnessed him, held him, celebrated him. Trees stood as silent observers, ancient, patient, knowing. They'd seen countless humans walk these trails, seen countless souls forget and remember, seen the eternal dance of sleeping and waking. And tonight they witnessed one more awakening. Gareth felt gratitude surge through him for the being, for the garden, for the vision of Christ, for the membrane, for the forest, for his life, for every moment painful and joyful that had led him here. All of it necessary, all of it perfect, all of it love. He reached for his radio. Should probably check in, report that he was fine, that the patrol was normal, that nothing unusual had happened. But how could he say that? Everything unusual had happened. He decided to wait, process first, integrate first, find words later. The night continued around him, cold, dark, beautiful. And Gareth Monroe, 46-year-old forest ranger, walked through Pine Hollow as a man transformed, resurrected, reborn, carrying Eden in his heart, carrying God in his consciousness, carrying love in his every step. The journey back had begun. Gareth reached the cabin feeling light in every step. The small ranger station appeared through the trees, familiar, humble, home. But tonight it looked different, glowed differently, or maybe he saw differently. The worn wood, the simple construction, the basic functionality, all of it beautiful, all of it sacred. Even this, especially this. He sat down and recalled every detail of the journey, not to preserve it, not to analyze it, just to honor it. The gray being emerging from mist, the membrane of living light, the inner garden, the shadow self-integrating, the golden field, the Christ consciousness. Every moment vivid, real, undeniable. not dream, not hallucination, experience. The gray being had disappeared, but the presence continued. Gareth felt it. The awareness, the companionship, the guidance. The being wasn't physically here, but its frequency remained. Its teaching remained. Its love remained. Like a friend who leaves but whose influence stays, whose words echo, whose impact lasts, never truly gone, just differently present. The vision of Jesus vibrated like a silent flame, burning in his consciousness, constant, warm, illuminating. Not the religious Jesus, not the theological Jesus, the actual Christ, the consciousness that had walked earth demonstrating love, showing unity, teaching remembering. That presence lived in him now, not separate, not external, internal, immediate. He understood Eden was his true inner dwelling, not a place he'd visited once, not a memory to cherish, but his actual home, his natural state, the frequency he'd always belonged to, the consciousness he'd temporarily forgotten. Eden wasn't out there, wasn't back there, wasn't lost. Eden was in here, always accessible, always available, always now. The longing for the sacred transformed into reunion. That ache he'd carried, that emptiness, that spiritual homesickness, not gone, fulfilled, satisfied, met, like searching for something for years and finally finding it, except he hadn't found it somewhere else. He'd found it in himself. The search ended, the reunion completed. Fear dissolved before the vibration of love. Simple, complete, absolute. Love wasn't just stronger than fear. Love revealed fear as illusion, as echo, as shadow. When consciousness aligned with love, real love, source love, Christ love, fear had nowhere to exist. Not suppressed, not conquered, simply dissolved. Like darkness dissolving in light, Gareth promised to live with more compassion, not as obligation, as natural response, as authentic expression of who he now knew himself to be. Compassion for others, compassion for himself, compassion for the journey, for the process, for the inevitable forgetting and remembering that human life required. Gentleness, patience, understanding. He decided to see the forest as a mirror of his own soul. Every tree a thought, every stream a feeling, every clearing an opening in consciousness. The forest had always been teaching, always been reflecting, always been showing. He'd just been too close to see. Now he saw, and he would keep seeing. His routine would no longer be empty. Same patrols, same trails, same responsibilities, but different intention, different awareness, different presence. Work wasn't separate from spiritual practice. Work was spiritual practice. Every moment opportunity, every interaction sacrament. No division between sacred and mundane. All of it sacred. Each patrol would be prayer in motion, walking meditation, moving worship, his body moving through forest, his consciousness moving through awareness. Each step planted, each breath intentional, not performing ritual, being ritual, living prayer instead of saying prayer. Each gesture would be a seed in the inner garden. Every choice, every word, every action, seeds, all of them seeds, growing something, creating something, manifesting something. Now he knew this. Now he could choose consciously, plant deliberately, tend carefully, gardener of his own consciousness, creator of his own experience. Gareth breathed deeply, embracing the new consciousness. Full breath, complete breath, receiving air, receiving life, receiving grace. His lungs expanded, his chest opened, his entire being said yes. Yes to this, yes to now, yes to awareness, yes to love, yes to unity, yes to being awake. The feeling of abandonment transformed into unity, complete transformation, total reversal. What had felt like exile was actually invitation. What had felt like punishment was actually preparation. What had felt like abandonment was actually always presence that he'd been too closed to perceive. Never separate, never alone, never abandoned, just temporarily amnesiac. And in the silence of night, he understood. The final understanding, the complete knowing, the ultimate truth. Simple, profound, undeniable. God never was far. It was the soul that fell asleep, not God's distance, his blindness, not God's absence, his unconsciousness, not God's silence, his deafness. The divine had been speaking constantly, through everything, through everyone, through every moment. He'd just forgotten how to listen. Now it finally awakened. His soul, his consciousness, his awareness, awake, alert, alive, seeing clearly, hearing truly, feeling deeply. The sleep was over. The amnesia was ending. The separation was healing, awakening, returning, remembering. Gareth sat in his cabin as dawn approached, the sky lightening, the forest stirring, a new day beginning. But this wasn't just another day. This was the first day of living awake, of walking conscious, of being present, the first day of the rest of his life. He stood, stretched, smiled. The exhaustion he'd carried for years, gone. The heaviness lifted, the emptiness filled. He felt young, energized, hopeful, not because circumstances changed, because he changed, and that changed everything. Gareth walked to the window, looked out at Pine Hollow, his forest, his home, his sacred assignment. The trees swayed gently. The morning light touched their branches. Everything glowed, or maybe he finally saw the glow that had always been there. He whispered to himself, to God, to the forest, to everything. Thank you. 2 words, infinite meaning. Gratitude for the journey, for the being, for the vision, for the awakening, for the return, for the life ahead, for the love that had never left, for the unity that had never broken, for remembering what he'd always been. The sun rose over Pine Hollow, light spilled across the forest, and Gareth Monroe, awake, aware, transformed, stepped into the new day carrying Eden in his heart. The journey was complete. The journey was beginning. And in the eternal now, both were true. If this story touched something in you that's been asleep, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happened to Gareth in Pine Hollow might be the reminder your soul has been waiting for.